Africa feeds the world. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry. This is fact, brutal and buried. Every piece of bread, every bar of chocolate, every phone in your hand, owes its breath to African soil. The sun beats down on the Congo, on Ghana, on Nigeria not just to warm the land, but to grow the bloodline of global trade. The media tells you Africa is hungry. But it is the world that is starving from Africa's table. The lie was well crafted, they made you believe Africa consumes. In truth, Africa produces, and the world eats. Coffee beans grown in the rich soils of Ethiopia are sipped in Paris cafes, sold for $10 a cup, while the farmer earns a few cents a pound. The imbalance is not a mistake, it is engineered. The West's comfort is built on the silent sacrifice of those who plant, harvest, and vanish in the dust. The cocoa from Côte d'Ivoire feeds billion-dollar corporations while the children who pick it have never tasted chocolate. Luxury exists because exploitation is hidden. The deeper you look, the darker it gets. Every apple you bite might be watered with the sweat of a farmer who sleeps hungry. They call it trade. But it's a blood deal. Africa sends out gold and gets back guns. Africa sends out diamonds and gets back debt. Africa feeds the factories, the banks, the fashion shows, the billionaires. Africa's minerals power your Teslas, your iPhones, your satellites. Yet the people living above that wealth die before reaching a hospital. The contradiction is sickening. You sit in air-conditioned rooms discussing African poverty while wearing jewelry that came from African mines. The hypocrisy is global and generational. Agriculture in Africa is not underdeveloped. It is undervalued by design. African farmers are some of the most skilled people on the planet, able to turn dry soil into a miracle. Yet their work is hijacked by middlemen, corporations, corrupt governments, and foreign aid with fine print thicker than contracts. When African grain reaches your grocery store, the story behind it is erased. The faces are erased. The struggles, erased. Only the profit remains. No continent supplies the world like Africa. Its rivers, its land, its people, they all pour out, and the rest of the globe drinks. The palm oil in your shampoo, the cotton in your shirt, the uranium in your power plants, the timber in your luxury furniture, it's all from Africa. But when did you last hear Africa thanked, celebrated, respected? You hear about its wars, not its worth. You hear about its diseases, not its genius. That's the design of colonial memory. Keep the giver labeled as the beggar. Africa is not empty. It is emptied. Its wealth is shipped away daily, legally and illegally, and it returns in the form of second-hand clothes, expired food, and slogans of development. How can a continent so rich in soil, water, sun, and labor be labeled poor? Because poverty is not always about lack. Sometimes it's about theft, and Africa has been robbed more than any place on earth. What grows in Africa feeds nations. Yet borders drawn by outsiders and economies controlled by outsiders have ensured that Africa remains a global farm with no ownership. Subsistence for the farmer, abundance for the exporter. That is the global equation. It is no accident. This is the system. This is the pipeline that turns African fruit into Western profit, African oil into international wars, African land into someone else's empire. The colonial chains may have fallen, but the hunger chains remain. Loans tied to food exports. Subsidies that crush local markets. Agreements signed under pressure, behind closed doors. Africa is not failing to feed itself, it is being prevented from doing so. When a nation exports rice and imports bread, something is wrong. When fertile lands lie fallow while foreign companies own plantations, something is stolen. And when the world applauds African potential while draining its reality, that's not ignorance, it's extraction. The narrative is the weapon. Make people think Africa is needy, and no one will ask why it's always giving. Make people think Africa is dependent, and no one will notice the dependence is reversed. Africa feeds the raw, the rare, the essential. Without it, industries fall. Economies collapse. Your comfort dies. But they won't tell you this. They want silence from the soil, not speech. They want compliance, not consciousness. But the truth grows wild, like the roots they tried to bury. Even the seeds are stolen. Patents placed on ancient crops. Genetically modified deals signed without consent. Farmers pushed into cycles of debt just to plant what once grew freely. This is not development. It is domination through food. Control the seed, you control the future. Africa's fields are battlegrounds, not for land, but for liberation. Every harvest is an act of survival. Every market day is a quiet rebellion. You speak of aid, but Africa has paid. In labor. In land. In silence. For centuries. And it continues to give while being framed as a burden. If Africa stopped feeding the world for even one season, the planet would feel the hunger. Not metaphorically. Literally. Shelves would go empty. Lights would go out. Systems would shake. Because what you consume comes from where you don't look. So next time you sip your coffee, bite your chocolate, wear your gold, ask yourself, who paid for it? Not in money. In sweat. In silence. In stolen futures. Africa feeds the world. Not as a choice, but as a system. And systems, once exposed, can fall. Africa is not waiting to be saved. It's waiting to be recognized. Not as a victim, but as the root. The source. The first table that everyone eats from, even when it eats last. The truth is not new. It has just been ignored. But the silence is ending. The soil is speaking. And the world must listen.